Okay. Yeah, so the Hermit card, we had ample time. It was a pretty hefty one. Let's do our normal format and go kind of big picture, overall impressions, and then we'll get into the sections of it. Yeah, I mean, for me overall, I found it was challenging. I like how he concludes every chapter in love. So I really love the takeaway. Like by the end of it, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is it kind of deal. But I think the steps to get there just are a little, this chapter in particular was a little black and white for me, like previous chapters, but I understand what he's saying. And I think it's important to have the controversy in this chapter because it is a challenging concept to know that Hermeticism implies being a hermit. Like, I think that's just a hard thing for anyone on this path to kind of grapple with, is the idea of being alone and like what that means. So it kind of tugged at, I don't know, my heartstrings or like insecurities in that area, maybe. And yeah, and I think that's just, it's an important thing to point out. But I'm interested to dive into it more and see how we like actually feel about what he said getting there, Yeah, so that's my overall impressions. Yeah, Cody, what's your overall?
Yeah, it's my favorite chapter so far. I relate with it more than any other. And I'm actually having a hard time, like I have to like, because I'm feeling it, but I'm feeling it, like I'm having a hard time seeing why it's kind of like black and white, because I feel like the chapter is like the opposite of black and white thinking. It's like synthesis. So I'll be curious to hear why you see that.
Okay.
But because I really like how it's like synthesizing polars and stuff, like like the whole idea of antimonies, and I like this kind of walk between kind of thing where you're not caught up in groupthink, but you're like, you actually are in your own, you kind of necessarily have to be a hermit to be there, but still being in the world in a sense. So there's this really interesting way of like, I think that's what I've really liked about it, is that it's like, it kind of resolves some of this like inner tension I have between like the purely spiritual like law land and like purely like scientific, like just, like logic, and it's like it bridges those gaps in a really interesting way. And I think there's really cool things to talk about in that.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. I'm excited to talk about this. Yeah, Britannia, what was your impressions?
I kind of agreed with Cody on this one too. Like, I don't know, I think what you said was like perfect. I liked how specific and how broad he was at the same time, because he did weave the two, and he would like juxtapose them, and he's been using a lot of pillars of knowledge to like get us to like lead us through the correct pillars of understanding. I don't know, so it was kind of like reminded me of like, what was it, compassion and severity. And then like it kind of reminded me of when he was comparing what doubt and faith. And I like that these relationships are interdependent but independent at the same time. But they, the way he explains, basically, yeah, like what Cody said, I was just like, it kind of alleviated some like internal, yeah, discomfort, I guess, like friction that I got, because like the idea of like being a hermit or being alone is like my biggest treasure and my biggest fear. So it's both, and it's something that like only we can understand as we experience it as an individual, but we understand that everyone experiences that. Like, you look at every single plant, animal, person, thing in this world, and it's it's existing as itself, and it has that kind of struggle being like alone in that experience, but at the same time it's sharing in this like bigger experience together. I don't know, we all get to be a part of each other in that way, and I think that's really cool. And I feel like even when he was like comparing like the human atom to like the what was it, like the constellation of like the God man like relationship. I really liked that because I think it was saying, you know, you have your own individual experiences with that, and like the severity comes in with like the growth of like, oh, you're doubting something because you're being pushed to like a precipice, and then you grow through it. And I don't know, it's kind of like, I don't know, I think miracles is kind of a hokey word, but I also like it in the sense that there's no other way to explain that phenomena of experience. So I really liked how he wove science and faith together a little bit more tightly. Like he showed why they were different, but like he showed that they come to like the same conclusion, like an inverted torus. Like there's two different directions in two different ways, but they're coming to the same place, you know? I don't know, I like that a lot. So I resonated with it. I think in the beginning too, I was like, is he going to take this somewhere? And I knew he was, but I think he was taking a lot of time to lay it all down to like get to the end point, which I think was very simple compared to all the information that he gave you to set up that. I guess that last message was really, I don't know, I liked that. I thought that was a really nice way to end it too. So I like the complexity and the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, let's go through it then. Because yeah, I'll point out where I kind of felt like there was, yeah, where I had, so I put question marks in for everything that, yeah, was that. So,
Hold on, I left my book in another room.
okay, yeah. This is a chapter to reference parts for sure. So he starts going through what each item.
Yeah, the symbolism. I really liked that.
So yeah, okay, because then it goes into, which I like how he tied that in throughout the chapter, right? Like the lamp, the mantle, and the staff, it kind of carried through in each part that he was talking about, which I thought was really, because I think previous chapters he hasn't done that as much, which was fine for those chapters, but I think for this chapter, like it was cool that the symbolism like carried through to every single part of the chapter. So what? And then it talks about, so the lamp is intelligence, analogy, the harmony of all by analogy is the mantle, and the authentic and immediate experience is the staff. This is page 201. And then idealism, realism, nominalism, faith, and empirical science. Do we want to go into it? Do we want to go into idealism, realism, or do you want to talk about, yeah, any comments on how he sets up the imagery there?
I think the imagery kind of sets up the threefold comparisons that he's going to make, and like they're like levels instead of like being like different things. They're like different levels of like similar notions. But I love the way he kind of divulges and expands on them as they go on, because I think even with the different, you know, the different things that in the card, like the actual symbolism in the card, kind of correspond to like the depth of the knowledge that he's like giving in the comparisons. And it like even goes through like the chapter, like you said, where like it's almost like that formula that he was talking about, where like you go from like active to passive, or like, and then you go through like an evolution, and then there's like the scientific like process, and that's like where you get like the last part of like active again. I mean, I don't know, the way he like circles it back around like that, I thought kind of brought it full circle. I don't know.
It's like how you transmute like wisdom through your body, kind of, or like
it's like the alchemy process. Experiencing that, yeah.
Is the hermit related to air? Do you know what element the hermit lies in? I mean, that's, I don't know if somebody knew off the top of their head.
Yeah.
Do the
There's
major
a really earthy and airy quality to the hermit, though. I feel like it's like that line between earth and air.
I agree.
A lot what he talks about. I mean, like that the whole like realism, idealism, nominalism in particularly is like that. It's like, is the world a world that's just objectively there and we're just stumbling around, or is there like, or is the world only there due to our like our perception of the world? You know, that's like, that's the tension between the two, but obviously like they need, both are needed, both viewpoints are needed to make a coherent whole. That's like, that's the, I think to me that's the synthesis. But
Well, and then it's like the oil from the lamp ignites the like this. That's like the connection to like the spirit being like the final guide. And I don't know, he kind of brought that back with like, it was the formula of spirit matter evolution.
yeah.
It's like, you know, the spirit fire, it's like matter, earth, you know, evolution is air.
Is that like the inverse, or the Yod He Vav He, but the inverse of that then is like, it can be a different formula that kind of leads to a different place potentially.
Yeah, it was supposed to mean chaos, but then he's like, that's not what it means.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that he did that, because he was like, I'm saving this phrase from dark magic and taking it back. And I was like, you go, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's true. It really just leads to like just pure rationality that's like devoid of meaning. You know, that's what it is, which is like the opposite of chaos.
Yeah.
What's
like,
that?
the information kind of gave me like this Kabbalic cross feeling of like horizontal and vertical like energy at the same time, like while reading it. But just even like the notions were like layered and like positioned in that way to where like I felt like there was a very like heavy, I don't know, influence or intention of that too, which I thought was a really nice touch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like every chapter almost, I feel like, alludes to that horizontal and vertical. It's like it always he always brings it back to that in some way. And this chapter really gets into that, like, because you have poles on either side of the horizontal and poles on either side of the vertical, and then it's like, and it kind of provides a map of where you stand in this graph, you know, in a sense of where you can be, like, which is really interesting. Like, you can really do a lot of self-analysis on that alone. You know, you could do some really interesting deep work in that. Like
the phrase he used when he said the constellation of like the relationship between God and man, I was like, the constellation, because like of that mapping, I was like, oh my God, I have a visceral attachment to that I guess analogy. I really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, later I think during the next part, the realism nominalism, that's when I started to like actually see more. Like I saw like Mandela kind of like imagery where something spawns off. But let's talk about that because I want to remember how I got there. So what did he define nominalism as? Like, what is that? I don't really know what that means necessarily. Like, that's not a word that in the daily.
Nominalism is seeing only particulars of things. So like it's like saying that only the particular object matters, and it's like, and its relationship doesn't really matter. Like the abstracted, like the abstract doesn't, and the general doesn't apply, like doesn't make any, like animal, like, or like a horse, like the classic example is like a horse is just a horse, and it doesn't require horseness to be a horse. So like it's this idea that only particulars really matter, but the realist, like the realist sees, is it the real wait
Yeah.
the realist versus
yeah
the realist sees like horseness as being precedent to a horse. There has to be this idea of horseness in order for there to be a horse.
See, and that's where it's kind of like Mandelic to me. I mean, I don't know if this particular instance or like example, I mean, I think it does though, because it's kind of like, that's where you can have multiple things that are called horse. Like while there's still an individual of it, there's things that branch off into this network of like what it means to be horse. It doesn't mean that like as small as you go, like you still have horse, and as big as you go, you still have horse as well. Like I mean, that's kind of more of how I guess maybe I think about things in terms of like people, like, you know, ecology, like ecological things, I guess, you know, it's like you have the idea, but it's like replicated out into a big thing that makes it also itself. Like you can't have both. It can't just be the small thing and it can't just be the big thing. Like, but
Well, that's exactly where he's going with that, is reconciling these two opposites, these two opposite ideas, because it's kind of absurd to think that either are absolutely true when they both have to exist in order for us to even think of things at all. He's really getting into like some pretty deep epistemology here, like in the field of epistemology and philosophy,
hmm.
which is like the study of knowledge.
Scientific enlightenment and like the qualitative and quantitative, and like I want to bring it back to like the vertical of like our like science as like the horizontal and religion as the vertical, but like in more of like an empirical life way. He was like, when he goes on his like, not like rant, but when he's like, you know, modern science has given us all these like miracles, all these ways of communicating, saving lives, you know, doing all this cool stuff, but like it wouldn't have necessarily happened if people didn't have like the faith to move forward
I remember that.
through that unknowing phase, you know, kind of like testing what the boundaries of what's possible is. And I really liked how he got to like a spiritual experience level instead of it just being like a fluke or like a coincidence. He like brings it to like a different level, which I think when you experience those types of things, you feel it. Like even when you like paint or make music or even something like light like that. But I mean, people that make like mass discoveries or, you know, work so hard in labs to like create certain things, like they really do have to like reach outside the box. And like, I don't know, my friend has been working in like one of the labs on like curing cancer basically. And he has to come up with things that haven't been done yet, but that could work. And then trial and error. And like, how maddening, but how beautiful and how amazing. And like to be on the precipice of something like that for humanity. I was just like, damn, like this chapter reminded me of him a lot. It was cool.
Yeah. And what I was thinking of is just that, like with science can be, and what he says is, can be amoral, like completely amoral, and just kind of like, and it can like tend towards that in a sense, like thinking that way, in the sense that there's no right and wrong. It's just facts are facts. And that's all there is, right? But there has to be some kind of, in order to like spark science anyway, there always has to be some sort of like yearning for truth, for beauty, for like these qualitative thing. And that's the whole like dichotomy between quality and quantity, right? These qualitative features that can't be, that are like ephemeral. You can't act, where do you actually reach true beauty, you know, true goodness? Like what is that? That's like been puzzling philosophers forever, you know, like that's like Plato's whole thing, is like, what is the pure goodness that, and like, and that's, it's like, but it can't, it's subjective. It's like it's qualitative. It's not, and there's something in like, so that's where he's really getting into this place where like that's necessary, but yet the serpent, you know, this level of just like amorality of like, of just wiping out beauty is like, does have a tendency also, and that tendency can be very destructive, like as he's pointed out as well. It can be really, can cause a lot of suffering, you know, a lot of like chaos, and where like, because it's just, because it can level everything to just being like, everything is just for my own personal gain, dominance over nature, and that's it, and like creating like myself as a god in its own right, you know, which is like, which doesn't take into, and it can actually be really limiting in perspective, in that it doesn't take into the relationship of wholes, you know, whole things, which requires this quality, this aspect of quality.
I do. I feel you. Like, I like how you said that. It's like there's no growth without this like divine inspiration or whatever you want to call that, you know, whether it be, you know, but serving your like what sparks your divine inspiration, like internally for whatever you're doing is like something that we need to, that I think it's hard for people to tap into now, because we have gotten into like a very stagnant kind of phase of let's be hopeless kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing that we could do, so let's just not do anything,
There's a lot of apathy in the world, but I think that's where, how do I even explain it? I feel like there's a lot of people that have the potential to kind of have those experiences, but I think our lives are created in a way where we don't get to like focus on those types of experiences or value that kind of stuff. And that's where I think that people get a little misconstrued with like quality and quantity type thing, because I think that there's a lot of people that get stuck on like the horizontal or like the earthly realm, or just like the it's like a singular realism and like a nominalism in the sense of the way they see the world. Like it's kind of like it's their world and we just live in it type experience,
Yeah,
versus
I think it's set up super easy for people that don't want to have divine inspiration. Like if you don't want, I mean, this is me being pessimistic, but if you don't want growth, like it's really easy to just like kind of fall into like line with what like you're supposed to do. And like, I think it takes true courage to like step outside of that. And some people have that, just have no choice, and that's who they are, and I mean, I've fallen into that category, but I see myself slipping into these patterns of complacency often, because it's a lot easier than the growth sometimes. But I think just reminding anybody that's had this like divine inspiration to kind of keep on that course, and that there's others in this path as well, is like an important thing to be aware of.
And I think like the point of like curiosity being like in a divine experience in general, like the curiosity of scientists, like there's something like you said, brave, or like something faithful about like being willing to go through something to learn something you don't know, that you may never know, but you feel like there's so much faith in the progress that, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people that do things like that, I mean, it may be for them in their career to an extent, but there's something so gripping about their curiosity in whatever they're studying or whatever they're trying to do, that it almost like doesn't give them a choice in a way. Like they have to do it. Like their drive is so strong and their conviction in it is so strong that, it pulls them through that, which I think is like part of like that, like kind of like divine experience of having, faith in general, and having it kind of like be like, for lack of a better phrase, Jesus take the wheel. And like you get to a certain point where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try the best I can with what knowledge I do have, and I'm willing to like learn and work with it and grow. And you never don't grow if you go into it with that attitude. Like even if you fail, like quote unquote fail, like science experiments fail, but sometimes failures are like the awesome. Like we got like what, penicillin from failure, like sometimes that's part of the process and part of like being willing to learn. Like maybe being willing to learn isn't being right, but it's being willing to see like the bigger truth or the deeper truth. And we just keep incrementally growing outward. And it's kind of fun to realize we're building like the structure that he created. I don't know. So good.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that just depends on what subject you're talking about though, too, because like you can be divinely curious about something that doesn't necessarily like bolster yourself or humanity, like it can be something where like, yeah, I would still call it like a touch of genius, like a stroke of divine, but I don't necessarily know that it's doing things to benefit your like personal or human growth necessarily, I mean, I just kind of saw that in my last position of someone who's a true genius at his craft that has pretty, no personal or spiritual growth, like it's very interesting to see someone who's so in tune with being so naturally gifted and talented and just brilliant, but also so internally tormented, and not able to communicate and have effective relationships. Like that's something that we also see here is, maybe a bolstering of certain types of touches of the divine that increase this, capital in whatever way that you can advance in society, but isn't really fulfilling or honoring that divine spark, like, and what it means to be human in that way, and have that experience maybe.
Also, hence Hermit, because it's like that hermit kind of reminds me of just like that tightrope walk of being a human and trying to balance like what feels right and what you think is right and what's just happening around you and what you're accidentally doing to yourself, like you're kind of like doing this balancing act, but like you do have to do it on your own, and I feel like that's part of people's process. I think the older I get, the less I see like black and white.
Yeah.
I feel like it's,
and maybe that's me caught up in that type of thinking too, like not honoring that as an spiritual experience, which it is, that it is, even like, yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious about like what really is going on internally, where are the motivations coming from? Like all these things, like I'm just curious about what kind of beliefs are causing that suffering or like causing that way of like seeming stagnation and maybe they don't think they're stagnant at all.
Well, so I mean, and do you want me to talk about this individual? Is that what? I mean, I can. I mean, we're recording though, but I'm highly down to watch meditations on the tarot YouTube.
I mean, you could like say it in abstract terms or something.
No, I mean, it's pretty specific. Like, I do think he's hiding a part of maybe his sexuality that he never has been like felt like he's able to experience, as well as like pretty traumatic like childhood experiences from probably females in his life. Thus creating a very polarizing effect whenever he looks at somebody. So he treats people very differently based on, and his whole thing is appearance, so like that's like he's beauty incarnate, whatever. So like it's very about like the aesthetic of things. So when it comes into like treating women like that, or knowing how to like cause me to break down. Like he was like very good at like having full-blown emotion. So it was like it's so in tune with like emotional divine and like beauty creative that like when something didn't make sense, it was like full channel, and it was like a wave of just like cursing and screaming and throwing and a fit, and touching on the points in you that are like most insecure and bringing him out, and then feeling so bad that he just fires you because he doesn't want to look at you, after that. It was so gnarly. Like, but I think that comes internally from childhood trauma mixed with like a lack of being who he can authentically wants to be himself in like a loving relationship. If that clarifies things.
And in a sense, like he is worshiping certain, like you use the word divine, like certain kinds of divinity, like certain aspects of nature, that are like that he's affixated to for whatever childhood reasons.
And I think all of that fuels this fire of like the passion for hair. It just like he lets all of it out like when he's doing somebody's hair, because it's like every time he cuts somebody's hair, it's just like wow, like it's not even difficult for him to have like that type of experience on like a normal thing, but it needs to be like fun, like fed in some way, and that's how he's feeding it for sure, is abusing his assistants.
That's interesting. That so touches on like themes of like selling your soul to the devil, doesn't it? Like for like great talent.
It's sad because I mean, this is an individual that's known me since birth, that I've known since birth, that's known both my parents very intimately, and it's like, I mean, and was screaming at me, but also saying, I love you, like it was like so gnarly, so just to like, I still hold a lot of love and respect for him, and I like wish him like so much healing, but like it's a toxic environment because that's what he set up for himself,
Yeah. And it's like actually like, and I feel bad saying like selling soul to the devil, because that gives like a negative connotation to it. Like it like it could like serve to demonize him. And I don't mean to do that, because I think that like, and even like in this book, even like the previous chapter, right, he has that whole thing about Faust selling, and like the devil is like, I like his like view of the devil. It's like he's just a trickster, like testing you kind of. He's not like, he doesn't actually have any power. He just draws you in these funny ways. But so like, and that gives compassion for the devil, and it gives compassion for people who are caught up. But but there are I think in a more nuanced sense, it's like the whole thing with Papa Legba being the devil and like Robert Johnson selling, that whole story. But like Legba is just like an Orisha spirit or something, or one of these spirits of the like divine spirits or nature spirits or whatever of this tribe in Africa. So, or like Legba is the like Haitian term or whatever, but it derives from an African deity, right? And like it's just, and you go to this deity, you go to the crossroads and lay offerings for this deity to help you out with some shit, and like of course Christianization creates turns him into the devil, but it's just a nature spirit that you're doing stuff with. But as we know as magicians, like selling, like making deals with spirits is dangerous work,
Well, I mean,
really, but we all do it, we're all doing it all the time through our lives. That's like because we're all magical beings, right?
And that's where magic, I like in that those distinctions are more like nuanced, that you're giving offerings to here, you can give offerings there. Like it's not like there's a fine line between what's considered an angel and a demon, like what's considered a sketchy demon on what John, Dee and Kelly's chart, like the Nokian chart. Like there's like sketchy things that you have to watch out for. Some not sketchy, but like be careful of these ones, like was kind of like like warnings, and those are like the angels, or like even like Nicole being like, oh, if you want to like, there was a demon that like when I summoned it, I just stopped smoking, like, and like completely, it just like has been known to just take that away. Like that's something like, it's so interesting that has like like things can have this kind of like mutually beneficial thing. And I think naming it though, and not just like, and that's where maybe responsibility comes in. It's like, I have a name for this. This has a place here. Like, I know what type of, exchange is going on. Like, if you're not aware of the exchange and you're just doing it, that's where you get the explosive, like unbalanced kind of tendencies, maybe. I don't know. This is just me talking now, but like, I could see how in my ex-boss's example, he doesn't know what he's feeding necessarily. It's just coming in and coming out. And these are patterns that he's created that's charged something, and maybe spiraled out of control in some ways,
Yeah, that's just it. And that's like that. I think that explains the task of the magician better than just about anything I've heard.
Really?
In a sense, like understanding these energies so that you know what you're feeding, and
Yeah,
you can.
shit.
Like the balance of intention too, and it's not like there's good or bad, like you say, like in like magic or anything, and like energy, like there's no like demon or angel really. There's no good and bad. There's just like I said with curiosity, I don't feel like curiosity is good or bad. There's just intention, like how you're going to use that energy. And so like I've noticed with a lot of toxic people that I care about, they kind of lean into the chaos, but not in a like, I don't know, not in like a good way, where they like feed the chaos, because it's kind of like, say someone, is a really good painter, but they have to be fucked up to paint because they think that the chaos is what makes them the artist. And that's where they get like robbed of who they are. And like, that's where I feel like you're like sell your soul to the devil is not really like, it's more like an analogy for like, you're pouring yourself into something without any intention. And that's where you're losing yourself, and I see people doing it like that, where, like some of my friends seriously were having like trouble DJing and worrying about like, how am I going to DJ sober? And I'm like, that actually really made me so sad. Like to hear from like more than one person, where I was like, dude, like you're doing the thing you love and you can't do it sober because you don't believe in yourself enough to do it, or because you feel like you have to be this way to like deal with the anxiety or the chaos, that like you just got to put intention and organization and kind of just like find other ways, There's, like playing the music is supposed to be that way, like that act is already the thing. So like sometimes I feel like, people run away from like their true nature of themselves. Like if you know you're a certain way, and you want to lean into that and like kind of deny the rest of the world its truth, then you're gonna be walking around like one of those horses with the little blinders on like your whole life. You're gonna be like, why does everyone not stay around me and want to be friends? And why don't I have close relationships? Or why can't I keep assistants? Things like that, where it I don't know, they victimize themselves and then they shell up more and then they double down and think, oh, the world's against me, and then they perpetuate that chaos and then that darkness becomes
Yeah.
good.
I mean, in this sense, it was like he felt really embarrassed for yelling at me so hard. And then he knew that I'm not one to bend over, like I do confront, like I'm not confrontational, but combative when I challenge authority. So if I don't agree with something, it's like, you're going to know, like, it's going to be a thing that I have to like learn to understand or like come to a peace with. And the time frame wasn't working for him, and he knew that I was going to like have that in the future. So I think he felt bad for yelling at me that hard. So he just had to let me go so he didn't see me again.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck.
But it's good. But again,
that's yeah. I think you had to get away. I mean, that's like the very point of that, is that like it wasn't good for you to be there either. So.
And it had to come from him. It had to be his choice. And I do think it's the mark. Like, this is the fifth assistant he's gone through in 6 months, so it's not like, and I was a lead, like, I mean, they're pretty fucked right now, like, on, so I don't know what the future is going to hold for that, but that's not really like, I don't have, I wish it all the best though. Like, I really do, but like, I'm just not sure. And it's good for me. Like, it's so good. So let's just, there's like more opportunities for me now, actually, which is good.
It's hard to make those decisions. It's like we talk about like being these good magicians that can make these distinctions between these energy qualities and like be able to choose what we want in our lives and whatnot. But like, man, that's tough. It's not, that's not easy, but that's good. That it seems like you're doing a good job, like making that. Yeah.
I mean, so I went into it thinking, okay, my life is on hold until January. Like, until I can get on a chair, I am an extension of this person, like that is my role. Like, I am putting, and I put everything on hold. And I realized, once he was, well, I heard, it was so weird. I heard my future change, like the vibrating in my ear, and I like looked up and I'm like, oh, whoa, my future just changed. Like, I didn't know how, and then literally the course of the rest of the day was me getting fired. But I think that I was betraying my like spiritual life, by putting my meditation and my spiritual path on hold, like I was, and saying that I can't do the things that would advance my soul, like, because I need to wait till January, to get through this program. And I think that betrayal of myself is something that I won't ever like do again, because my spiritual life is number one in my life. Like, if a job is not allowing me to have my meditation practice in the morning or get adequate sleep or like eat or like not stress out, like it's just, that's not going to be something that's conducive to my magic practice. So like, I can't participate in that, so I just really want to like honor that part of me and the pact that I made there above everything now.
Yeah, you had kind of decided to go that like will way of like putting the blinders on and just letting yourself do that and sacrificing the bigger picture side of things.
For the sake of feeding his demon. I mean, really, if you want to say it, like, I wanted a taste, I wanted to learn how, and that's how I thought that I could learn how to do hair that way. But I mean, I think throughout this conversation has been really enlightening in that way. Like, I won't ever feed that demon the same way he feeds it. Like, it won't ever have the same exchange in my life that it has in his, and if that is what inspired that creative beauty that he has, or maybe it's something else. But like, again, like, I need to find my own kind of way of, having that transmutation, or, having that exchange go down,
Yeah, and if you can, if you want to, and you're keeping in hair, you can still do awesome hair from your own way. You
Yeah.
don't have to feed
It
back.
has to be like, I can't
Yeah.
be, I can't do it exactly like he does. Like that's what like hair is not like there has to be some creative thing if you want to be like good at it, like it's not just like step one, step two, like it is until a certain point.
I mean, there's objective techniques, but it's like subjective in the sense of the person, your personality, your style, like what you think looks best on them, your techniques for applicating those looks, or like your intention towards it. So, and I feel like you were saying, like sometimes he cuts the hair how he wants to because he knows it's gonna look good. But I feel like when you're cutting hair, like at least I've noticed with my haircuts from you versus other people, you actually cut it for the person in the moment that they're in, not like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, when you get a haircut and you're like, that doesn't look like me. I mean, it's a great haircut, but it doesn't look like me. And you're just like, oh my God, how long am I gonna not look like myself for? And I got the worst haircut. And then Haley started cutting my hair, and like seriously, I cried and I couldn't take a hat off for like 5 days or look at myself in the mirror. Because my haircut was just not me. And I was like, so when you started cutting my hair, I was like, I noticed like a difference in like the energy. So I think that will be, just something for you to think about, like moving forward with like the dynamic that you're going to have in your own workspace, or where you're going to work in the future, and bring that and have space to nurture that and grow that, and have people like mentor you instead of like yelling at you or like pushing you into their lane, instead of you getting to drive, in your lane next to them or something,
Yeah, thanks, that's awesome. That's what I'll keep that in mind though. That's a good thing to carry throughout my career for sure. Let's get into I love that detour, but let's get back into
I could relate that to the chapter.
yeah, do it. Ooh.
Or yeah, like I see, or the whole book, but I see like this relationality, like you're feeding like a bigger, instead of like your own like goals to like be this great like dominant cutter, you're like feeding a more that's from what Britannia's analysis is, that you're like feeding this more holistic, like let's relate and like create hair together. Like I'm just a tool that can like bring you out, I'm not me anymore, so you're like an egolessness, and that's kind of more like, I think in his version of like the divine pillar, like the pillar to like this really higher power that's not demonic, like that is like something like bigger, like more, it's more of an angelic thing, it's closer to on that level. So, and like you can make those distinctions between these spirits,
Okay. Cool.
I think in the like context of this particular Christian tradition, I can see that as there's like different qualities of energy. And I think that's what the book really does well in like portraying, because that's what the tarot is all about. It's like getting into the nuances of qualities of these kind of universal energies.
Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. I do think that again, I mean, if we are talking energies, like that is a more you can't run out of energy if you do it that way. You know what I'm trying to say, like how do you say the self-sustaining system, I guess, like that would be more, because if you're taking energy, and if you're working with spirits on the same plane as you, or like similarly on this line, it's just not, it's going to be like you need to feed it things like it's on the same like level kind of. So like the above doesn't need any like fuel really, I don't think. I mean, or I don't know, I mean that's stuff that maybe that's above my pay grade right now, but like that's more of like what Damon like talk would be like. Just I know that in one of the last books we read, right, it just like I just like cleansed him, right? And that's just like and it doesn't need anything to like,
it's selfless.
Yeah, but it's almost like it's the exchange is just like not like, it's just on a different plane. I don't even know, like it doesn't feed the same, it doesn't like use the same type of energy as us. So it can like transmute our energy really easily and then not like be burnt out, or just like literally like just like recycle it like how it does in its space. I don't even know. I think that's above my pay grade. Never mind.
No, I like that.
I was gonna say this gonna sound really weird. I don't know if you guys watch Westworld, but there's this like moment where one of the characters is like reflecting upon like the world and like the AI and the human like integration, and kind of like talking about the difference between like AI and like human. And it was just really interesting, I guess, to see how, oh gosh, how do you even explain it? Like, I don't know. There's like levels of integration of like where they're just on like a different level. Like AI doesn't consume, the same power, like you said, like they don't have the same power as humans. They don't have the same feelings or relations to like life or living or the world or like the conception of a lifetime even, or like giving birth to something versus like creating something. Like there were all these like different kind of parallels. And I think one is like showing you like kind of like a superficial, shallow, like here's the best version of the thing, but it's hollow. It's empty on the inside. Kind of like when he was talking about the cones, like there's two lights at the end, and then like in the middle is darkness. Like, I don't know. And like when he was like drawing the like cones in the chapter, but it made me think of that with like perspectives, and like sometimes people get lost in the sauce, and sometimes people are like Icarus and they fly too close to the light, and I think that being like too close to the light is the same thing as being in utter darkness, because you're being destroyed either way. So it's kind of like the intention and like your path and all that kind of stuff. But it was interesting for me to like see that third person character like in the show, like kind of talking about that, and then me reading this chapter, I was like, oh.
Well,
So cool.
that brings up a good point. Like angelic, like these type of energies are pure transmuted energy of one thing. Like, am I cutting out? Is that me? Whatever.
I hear you.
So it's like pure transmuted energy of that one thing. So you can like have, it knows how to I mean, this is me all just theorizing, but like it knows how to like clean that, because it's so focused on what that is. I mean, especially when you get into like the hierarchy of angels, then if you're, if as specific as you go, it can just clean you of that one thing really well, or it knows how to transmute it in your life as you need it. I mean, that's what we see with our ritual work, right? In these like in elemental workings, like, oh, this angel really knows how to like clean up your act in this one fucking, element. Like, I think with the daemon type of work, that's where it's like, it knows how to just what you need to transmute all the way. So like, it doesn't, and it's like gone through that already, and it's just the pure form of that. So like, it can just like fully, like kind of like AI, I guess in this, like in your analogy, like AI just doesn't like even operate on that same, it's already gone through it in that way, like just cleansed it, I don't know.
And then also even talking about like what's transcending for them versus like what's transcending for humans, because for the humans, transcending was AI. Humans were trying to transcend their humanness with AI, and now AI, like how do we cope with being able to transcend? How do we transcend? Like, are we purposeless, or what is? And so I think that it's the same thing. It's like a generational. It makes you see how generational trauma is passed down from the man. Like, so I think that that's something that I really, really like put together in this chapter, and with that, watching the show at the same time, I was like, oh,
that's
cool. And then you like see God, and you're just like, oh, like how when you see parents as like humans instead, or like just other people that have problems and like stuff like that too, and you're like, oh, like us being made in that image is like a transcending of like one realm that couldn't come to the next, but like the essence of it did. And that's so cool.
That's what, because I mean, really, it's like going back to the mandala thing, or the like, it's like the one part is just a bigger part of it. Like, it's all connected in that way of like healing the smallest node heals the whole system, or like, not transmute. Like, what's your form of ascension? It's just becoming more in one with like what what this like connection is supposed to be, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, like.
But then they got to the point where like you know, everything's on a level, and then there are outliers where like the order of like the interconnectedness is just like they're glitching. And she's like, why is that? And it's because it's like there's flaws in humans, so there's going to be flaws in them, or like, you know, there's going to be like there are actual like human reasons, and the AI is like, I just don't compute, you know. They're not happy, and AI is like, what's happy, you know.
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, I like that analogy. But I think also what you were saying, Haley, is like is actually really relevant. And I think what you're talking about is that, and that's something that's like kind of frustrated me about a lot of this magic. And what I really like about this book is that, and the previous book, the Diamond book, is that it actually like gets to a point where you're not, because with angels and stuff and summoning different energies, and that's the thing about demons, they're still also a refraction of, I think, of the same light. You know, everything is the entire creation. So, but you're just like tuning into that particular energy, and you can like so easily, no matter what spirit, angel, demon, whatever, you can so easily throw yourself out of some kind of alignment if you're always playing with these things, these energies. But like what this book is getting to is just like that gnosis with the divine, and like letting the divine spark you, and not needing to play with all those energies so much. But like he's like kind of making you have to understand a lot of those things through the tarot, and that's what the tarot does, is kind of help you understand these things, so that, and that his whole bent is that it's understanding so that you can align with that, with the daimon, if you will. I mean, I don't think he would use that term, but he might have it somewhere in the book in a sense. But
I mean, holy guardian angel,
with
right?
whatever that divinity is, yeah.
I wonder if he is going to mention that actually, because that's such a that's such a big part of, I mean, he has mentioned the Trinity in a previous chapter, I think we talked about, right?
He brought the Trinity up in this chapter too.
He did?
Yeah, he's brought it up a few times. He
Okay.
did in this chapter, yeah, just briefly.
When he was like bringing it back to like Jesus, as in like, you know, Jesus died for everyone, so he represents all man, and he transcends from being a singular man into being all men.
Oh, was
Yeah.
that what he talked about? Trinity?
Synthesis of the Trinity, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jesus kind of represents the synthesis of the nominalism and
I
the
wonder what he would
realism,
think about
right?
that though, like contacting your, you know, holy guardian angel or whatever.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. Hopefully he talks about it at some point. I mean,
Yeah,
we're only halfway through the book. Did you read the book, Cody?
I've almost finished the next chapter.
Oh, then okay, good. I thought you were gonna say the book. I'm like, oh my
No,
god.
no, just the next chapter. Which the next chapter I have tons of disagreement with. Like a lot of it rubs me the wrong way.
The next one.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll get there.
conundrum for me too. I'm kind of excited, but like not looking forward to this card because I keep getting this card in my tarot readings.
The wheel.
I keep getting this card, but it's like usually in the middle of two cards that are like, you know, I love hard work, and I love like knowing that I'm gonna like, you know, level up and do some good old fashioned like sleeve rolling and getting my hands dirty. But you know, when you're constantly just like, oh man, like are things gonna get like easier or better? Am I gonna level up and it's gonna feel easier or better? But like that's very subjective. And if you are constantly trying to better yourself and stuff, you kind of have to take a minute to be like, oh, I am where I wanted to be for a second, and then I can, you know, reevaluate what progress I want to make. But I feel like the wheel just reminds me of how I just keep turning, and I have all these things that constantly come up that need to be addressed. And I don't know, it's a whole me and the wheel.
The wheel is kind of a stuck in a time loop. That's all I'll say about that. It's yeah.
Great.
It's a good time for it to come up though. I'm in that part of my life where I think it's pertinent, so I'm excited.
Good. Good. Okay, so finishing up I think we talked a lot about the next one, which was the synthesis, but empirical science, right? Faith and empirical science. We talked about that with and then we talked about the synthesis, religion and science. The serpent has not lied on the plane where its voice and promises were audible. That was interesting. And then I guess to conclude this part on 217, let us also not fear, therefore, to become like the hermit of the tarot, who is clothed in the habit of faith, and whose doubt fathoms the ground with his staff. The light of the lamp which he holds is that which is emitted from the opposition of faith and doubt. I liked that imagery.
Yeah, I like the idea of like you have a lamp in the darkness, like, and you're feeling your way with the cane, right? So you're like feeling the ground, the territory pretty solidly, but then you're like surveying where you want to survey, kind of in like you can survey over here, you can survey over here. So like, and all three of those are necessary for like being whole as the hermit, like as the one who can like be on the ground, but also like up here a little bit and like be able to see multiple perspectives, see things from different angles, and not just like single-minded in any one of those areas.
It plays senses, as sense being like even more like spiritual, like intuition too, where like I know the lamp is kind of like significant in the acknowledgement of like the light is only like, you can only see so far, you can only perceive or know so much, and you have to use like your other intuitive senses, not like your your smell and your touch and your sight, but like your like how it feels like within you and like around you, and like your relationship to that. And I don't know, I loved that concept of the visceral senses that are so abstract, and then that like I guess the analogy of like the light, when you assume he's using it to see, but it's more of like a physical representation of something more divine too. Like I love that. And then like on was it at the bottom of 217 where he's just saying, namely that you endeavor to draw light from darkness.
Yeah.
Because that's like the transmutation of like not needing to see so much to understand, like physically see, but like knowing in a different way and like experiencing life like deeper.
That was my first acid trip. I'm recording, sorry, but yeah, it was just everything started getting super duper dark and I was like having a panic attack or something. And then I'm like, as like I saw all my thoughts just like go away from my head, and I was like, oh man, I'm disappearing, darkness, like there's only darkness. I'm like, what cancels dark? Light. And like as soon as I thought that, it was like a light popped through in the distance, and then it like kept spiraling forward until like I was just like only light, and then I was like just in this space of just pure light, which was really cool. It was like the opposite of having no thoughts, but it was like, but not overwhelming, just like whew. Cool.
You experienced exactly what he's describing.
So trippy. When I read it, I'm like,
in the light. Yeah.
Seen that.
Plain is the synthesis of our colors of the neutral realism above, and like I like that whole thing too. I've had that experience a few times with like different types of things, but especially in like deprivation tanks where you're deprived of light and sound and stuff. So it's like your senses are irrelevant at that moment. Your body is weightless. You can't hear or smell or see anything. And a lot of the time I have a lot of light play where like I have like I eventually just see a bunch of lights, and then they like turn, and I like by the time I like dissolve all my thoughts and like my egos and like all the things that you think make you, and then you rest in that spot of light where there's just feeling and no real like concrete thoughts. You just are. I feel like that's like that's where I try to go with meditation every time I meditate, but like deprivation tanks have definitely provided that space for me. Really cool.
You gotta do that. So I think this is where I started running into like a little bit of issues though, honestly, even though like it does feel like I think that's where I think I was caught up, like I said before, in like the I'm not a huge fan of how he broke down um the different types of like light and the different types of, but I get it. Like I do get it. I think I'm just wanting to argue. So this is my combative nature, according to my ex-boss.
No, I think you're right. Where it's like it's more of a metaphorical expression of what he's trying to say than like a literal. So it's like you're looking at it like, oh, this is a textbook and this is like the diagram of the spectrum. But then you're like, well, nothing's linear like that. I mean, that's a cool way to like conceptualize it for a human brain because we try to organize everything.
Mhm.
But I think there it loses a little bit of its mystique, if you will, by narrowing it down to like a concrete drawing
Yeah.
or like that kind of directional interpretation too.
Like its application isn't always like, I don't think that's always accurate in like a lot of cases. I don't feel like some of these, like an example would, but I mean, maybe would need to think about that a little bit more.
He has a personal sprinkle in it, and I think it comes with like there's just like some personal like things that he has, but I feel like sometimes, and I don't know if I want to bring it back to this if this is like controversial, but sometimes I feel like it's like he's always trying to like kind of cobble the shoe into like a religious Christian narrative. And I can see him doing that. And then it
No,
yeah, it's what that part kind of is like whatever to me.
that's
So
kind of what I mean. It's like what breaking, like, is this where I'm trying to see where it is, but like Nirvana versus like, okay, yeah. So I mean, this is a little bit ahead, 224. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm like, maybe we want to talk about stuff before that, but it was like what? Transcendental peace, imminent peace, the peace of predominance, and the peace of death. Like, I don't know. I was just very like, just thought it was interesting. I'm like, oh, this is true peace. This one's true peace. Like, I don't know. Like, I found a very, very true peace when I was in my nihilist phase. Like, there was a true peace, is knowing that nothing mattered. It didn't serve me well because I continued to live my life, and these things were consequences, that transpired after that. But
I do want to say, I think he's laid out in previous chapters, and I think like we might be forgetting, I don't quite remember, but he's laid out like his criteria for truth, like pretty explicitly.
yeah.
And I think there might be something in that in what he's talking about. If he's using that as a technical term, like true peace, like, and I think it has something to do with like truth. Like his criteria of truth is that it's
he's elevating it past a point of subjectivity and objectivity too. It's like an ultimate truth, and it doesn't matter if you deny it or accept it.
I flipped to the chapter, so I'll look at it. But you're right. Sorry.
For lack of a better like lean back, I feel like I'm wondering if like he comes it that way because of like he has like this Christian idea of that there is one truth, one God, one way, one will, And for me, I feel like it kind of tears down his argument of multiplicity and like individual and non-duality, like we're like there's like all those relationships kind of unravel a little bit when I read it that way. And maybe like the longer I get in the book, the better I am at like reading it not that way. But I think that especially when I reflect on like the past like text and like apply it to the next chapter and stuff like that, I get a little hung up. Not like hung up like conceptually or like I don't understand it, but I just don't necessarily agree. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because like when he was like talking about the baptism thing, I was like, okay, like this seems like a little bit of propaganda to just get baptized. Like,
When was that?
I was earlier in the chapter when he
Oh,
was
I
talking.
missed that.
It's like the transmutation is the water and the fire, and then like, you know, it connects you
Oh,
to the wholeness of like something bigger than yourself instead of just like your own experience. It's like connecting you to like the spiritual realm and like in like a new way, you know, where you're like a new, fresh, like pure thing in this new, fresh, pure place that, you know, is constantly just
yeah.
being. And that's the ultimate truth. And so that's why it's like so important.
I mean, see, I feel like that's my ritual work, like transmuted me in water and fire. Like I literally read it like, oh, cool. Like I've been doing this all along. Like, you know, like, I don't know. I mean, I've been baptized, but it certainly was not that for me. It was me being in a sweaty pool with, you know, 20 people staring at me, you know, and dressing up and going to an abusive lunch after, you know, and screaming in the car. Like it was not like a fruitful or like enlightening like service, you know. I'm sure if it is like more ceremonial and more intentional, then absolutely, you know, if you like really have it where you're like transmuting spirit during your service. But I think that's so fucking rare now in churches. Like it's just about like community.
And I bet he would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Like a true baptism is not what most churches do, and I bet he would.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like I think of like, oh brother, where art thou, when they're like bathing and singing and like, you know, full on like feels like a transmutation of sorts, you know. Like he just is to come and like goes and like, I will follow you, you know. I don't know. I really like that movie.
So
Yeah.
spiritual side of it, but I think that like the judgmental side of like somebody there's like this, I have this air of caution when I think of like people like, in I guess the way it read is that he is somehow spiritually superior for being baptized. And I don't like that, because I think that we've all like kind of like had this discussion before. We're like, I mean, I think it was even in like a freaking show or a book I just read recently where they were saying like, you know, forgive me, you know, for I've sinned, and if I don't know that I've sinned, then forgive me for that. And, you know, and it was just talking about like, it just showed the perspective of like these characters and what they think is bad versus good, you know, or what's justified and what isn't and stuff, and their reflection upon like God, you know, judging them for it. And I was like, oh, so like I don't know, and it just kind of tied back, I don't know, into like I don't know, maybe it's just the baptism. It caught me hung up at the beginning, and I was like, it's gonna get hard to get past this one, but I just kept reading because I was like, I'm just gonna pretend like, you know, that part was just metaphorical too, because
I agree.
you know, metaphorical thing that you're doing physically as like a ritual to like reinforce your spiritual beliefs. But then I'm also like, I don't feel like anyone should feel superior to someone else in like in the face of truth. Like if you believe in like deep truth, like you wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. He's betraying some of his own ideas. Like the hermit doesn't ascribe to any absolute truth, I would think, from the whole chapter, and yet he's saying like he's making these claims to truth. Which,
yeah, that's what I was.
And again, it's like it's like the classic epistemological mystery is that we can't, like, how do we know anything is being true at all? And most philosophers, I think, usually come to some conclusion that we can't, you know, we can only approximate truth, right?
No, I don't know.
So, but making any claims to absolute truth, and even approximation is iffy. Like, is that what you said?
He dances a lot of absolutes in the chapter, and he uses them to his benefit and to like somewhat sometimes I think his demise, because he'll use them a lot of the time to be like, these absolutes are both wrong, you know, kind of like he did with realism and nominalism. He's like, these are both two absolutes that are correct but incorrect, you know. He like tears them down and builds them up, and I feel like he has the same thing going on within his whole, like his own narrative and perspective in some ways.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think my perspective here is that you need people on every like area of that, like north south pole equator kind of thing. Like you need people reaching to nirvana, like you need people like going through the mud, you know, like, or going deep, like, and you need to yourself like see what's down there and like have that range and like experience it for a while. Like I'm so grateful for like me being this whole firing experience and like going through that, because I know that like I'm not going to betray my spiritual life in my workplace again, like, which I think is like most important. But B, like if I ever want to set up a salon, sorry, I keep coming back to this, but it's just a relevant example. Like I'm not going to have the same type of like systems that he has in place, because they're not functional and they don't make people feel good. So you need that reflection in order to like create new systems. Like this is like a system that needs to be upheld, and like you need to be able to see it from that range in order to know what kind of things. And if you were just coming from it for like the truth level all the time, if you didn't have people on everything, then you wouldn't know where the range is. Like you wouldn't have that perspective. But I don't know that he's not agreeing with that necessarily. I just think that it's like not giving it as much like honor in people that are in those phases as it could, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I feel like you would have a really good response to that, Cody.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the idea of faith and its relationship with truth. And he talks about faith a lot in this chapter, but like you kind of have to have faith in order to be there to be, or you kind of have to have some sense of truth in order to have faith, maybe. Like you have to have faith in something absolute. But at the same time, you're like still groping in darkness as the hermit. So there's these ideals, like this ideal of truth, maybe. I have this sense like the hermit represents this ideal of truth, potentially, that you can never actually attain, but you have faith in that, like in the aspiration or something. And that's the truth. There's some, or
Yes.
like this ability to like know both at the same time, like some kind of like synthesis that just resides in your heart, that you just, it's like this knowing. And I see that as the ideal that he's kind of talking about. But you see, he like then couches it in these Christian terms of like you get baptized and you get there, and that's just his way. But I think there's multiple other ways, and I think he even is like showing that in some sense. But
He shows us when he brings it back to the Buddhism and the lotus and the different numbers of the petals and the different layers and like what they kind of represent, which I really like, because then I was like, okay, now we're back out to the big picture again, instead of this like one tiny keyhole that you can see through to get to your next salvation. You know, I was like,
I love the like making every chakra the heart, like of the heart.
Yeah.
Like that's really cool, and that's really powerful. Like I think there's some really strong magic in that.
the spiritual alchemy, yeah, that attributes to the heart of the central place of all practices.
Have you ever heard that in Buddhist, like have you ever heard that, either of you? Yeah, like transmuting other chakras into heart chakra energy.
Oh yeah. Like you can do a lot of like, I do like a lot of sound bath tuning and like a lot of like light.
That's okay. So it's one thing to have a tuning fork in your chakras, but to like go, because I mean, sorry.
You're like, no, you can tune like other places, like say like your throat's like feeling like it's out of tune. You know, it may be up here, or maybe down here, but you use the you know, when you tune a guitar, use the string above it to tune the one below it.
Yeah.
That. It's like harmonics.
But it
like
carries a different note than the string that you're like, I think that's what, isn't he, maybe I read it wrong, but I think he's saying like, maybe I read it wrong then. I was thinking like,
well,
what were you thinking, Cody? I was
there,
thinking
there are yogic practices to tune each chakra to its specific energy, and thereby balancing all the chakras. But then I hadn't heard of like tuning every chakra as the heart chakra. That's different from what I've ever heard about.
process I went through was like tuning and then bringing it to, because like if they're all out of tune, like I don't know, I always do like a cleansing like chakra like realignment thing, and then I go into like my deeper practice, because I don't want to start off with a limp, because then you'll overcompensate somewhere, like you'll be overthinking about something and never get too deep into meditation, or you know, you'll be too sensationally aware of something that you're uncomfortable with or whatever. Like, I don't know. So I find that like evening yourself out and then like moving like things where you want them. Like, I don't know. I like doing heart chakra like for all of them because I don't know, I'm like a really loving person, and sometimes like I have to like calm down my other like areas. Like they get a little much for me if I'm too heady or if I'm too grounded or if, you know, I'm feeling like over, I don't know. Sometimes my tool for like feeling over extended with like my heart or my like self is to like love myself, but I have to tune everything to like the heart to like be loving just to myself and like in that one place. Like
Yeah.
for yourself, I don't know. Or like, I don't know, you're like with everything, but it's, you know how it is. You're like, I don't know. It's like you said earlier with like, you know, certain energies just know how to like transmute like your energies and it's not really a big deal for them. Whereas like for you, you're like, oh my God, this weight is so heavy.
For- I'm
'Cause
trying
I
to
don't
see where he said that.
kind of have to constantly like take in, acknowledge, and let go of energies. Because if I like push them to the side, then they just like remain.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I liked his like analogies, like going into the Buddhism in the like practical sense of like being able to intentionally like do that for yourself, you know, instead of having to wait for like divinity to like reach out and like touch you with the, you know, miracle. You can like have a little bit of power like with just merely acknowledging like that that's a thing. Being like, oh, I can move my heart chakra to everywhere, you know, like I can bring that tone to everywhere, like that's an option, you know.
I mean, but it changes the actual, like, I think, is he talking about changing the actual, like, composition of that chakra? Like, I read it like a full transmutation of that chakra center. Like, where there would be, you wouldn't be able to go back to, like, it would be like a long, like, ritual for, like, like, I'm thinking, like, advanced yogic practices of, like, transmuting each of your chakras to only resonate on, like, heart level. Like, that hurts and it can't go back, you know. It's not like, oh, the throat's like resonating at this like heart level and it's balancing and cleansing everything to bring it to center and to focus on heart, but it's more like, no, I have 7 hearts right now. You know.
Yeah, but at the same time, each one still has its own characteristics.
I guess it would
He labels that too, so there's still, maybe it's not like a complete transmutation because there's still that energy quality,
right,
somewhere in there, but it like it fuses the heart into that energy.
I heart.
Yeah.
I create heart. I ground heart. I don't know what that.
Yeah. I eat heart.
I eat heart.
That's the mouth chakra.
Heart. Great. I'd really be interested in looking up that though a little bit further. I mean, I like I think there are some really good like tuning things. Like Britannia, you mentioned a lot of really cool ones, but I think it would be cool to find like, yeah, like to back like something really gnarly where it's like we dissected all these chakras, you know.
But that's like it's getting into this, like, what is the heart? Like, what is that energy of that heart, you know? And like, it does have something to do with his divine connection in his
well, that's what I mean. I think that his practice is like love, and like his Christian Hermeticism is centered around love. Like that's really what. So like, I feel like it would be like, I mean, so much of my practice is focused around, I guess, HGA energy. I'm not ready there yet, but like Damon energy, you know. So like that would be like maybe a part of that like cleansing transmutation would be like just balancing the heart or just coming in and filling all the areas with love, you know. Or something like maybe he's equating it like that, you know, or maybe that's what he's talking about a little bit. Like, I don't know.
Kind of what he was talking about too, and he was talking about like, I don't know. I felt like he bringing back to like surrendering of yourself to like the divine in that way is like that's how you're surrendering like each chakra to like the greater truth or the light, or you know what I mean? And so like that's where it's like not necessarily just you, it's like you and like the force of, you know, everything that goes into that. I don't know, there was something like the salvation of like the soul, and it was talking about like the restoration of the reign of the heart, and I felt like that kind of was like indicative of like a surrender to like a higher power in that way, where like, you know, like you don't question your heart, you know, because like you feel it so deeply that it's like undeniable and it's true. And I feel like that's something that comes from somewhere else too, in that sense. So we all feel like, you know, I love like I love the world, like I love trees and the ocean. I'm like, it's not like a thing that can love me back in like the quintessential way where it tells me it loves me with the words I love you. When me going to the beach and feeling the sun and the sand and like listening to the waves and just feeling better afterwards, I don't think I could think of any better like idea of like transmutation or love or like resigning of your heart to like something that's like true and pure, and like, you know, you feel like your perspective is different when you're in that place or like operating on that level too, because then you don't really like, nothing can really marsh your mellow, you know, in that sense where you are coming at everything at like a heart level when you're like constantly putting yourself like in that place.
Hmm.
So that's, I kind of like the meditation, and like even just like the idea of like, you know, the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, where it's like the like the petals of the lotus, and it kind of, you know, represents that whole process too, and like the different layers of like perception in the world, and you know, intuition and all that. And I really like, I don't know, I really like how he ties that in with like the layers of the heart. I think it wasn't just like the layers of like the world, but it was like the personal layers of your own heart, you know.
I mean, I guess,
That's,
yeah. What were you gonna say, Cody?
well, is that the oil that lights the lamp then too? Yeah.
Nice. I mean, it is though, like for growth though, you have to be able to see the darkness. Like I think that it's important to like remember where your heart is and know how to go through that, but it's like important to see all of the like range of what's going on, right? I think some like, I think if you're only in this like in the heart level space all the time, I mean, I don't know, maybe not. Like you can get caught up in that like nirvana state almost. Like
Maybe you need the darkness to even have that though, and it's because like,
Mhm.
and this is the part of the chapter I think that I didn't understand as much, but the when he where he gets into like the night, the eternal, the hermit lives in night, or the hermit lives in darkness. So there he is talking about that, like the hermit being in darkness,
Yeah.
not being really important.
Well, I think that represents like the space between us too, like in general, and like the space between us and divine and us and other people. And we always have that internal world.
Well, and
that you
that's being grounded. It's being grounded, but still remembering that light. Like it's, yeah, I think you're right. Like that in between where it's like, my feet are on the ground, my head is in the sky. Like I am navigating from my heart level through this darkness by where I want to be, right? Or where divine path is taking me.
Yeah.
It's a hard fine line though. Like I really think, and I think it's like, I don't know. I haven't, yeah.
Well, when he says like what is it, 227, he says like wisdom revealed you know, by the lotus will cease to be abstract and transcendental, will become full of warmth and fire.
Mm.
I brought that back to like the lamp, but like just in the way it becomes less abstract as you touch it, like in that way of like experiencing it. I don't know, like as you know, get more aware and you go deeper into your practice within yourself and within like the world and like the context of truth, and
Like you're
you know,
walking through it.
or yeah, like when you come into contact with it is when it becomes like from solid to abstract, or from abstract to solid, kind of like, what was it, what card was it? It was, I think it, yeah, was it the justice where like like No, it was the Empress, where like it's that moment when you go from not knowing to knowing.
Yeah.
Like
I
that's
think.
like kind of referring to that.
Yeah.
But a spiritual alchemy way.
Trippy.
I just love like double entendres where it's like spiritual alchemy is not only like a tangible change, like a physical change of like metamorphosis, you know, like transition from like solid to liquid to gas, but also just like a deep, I don't know, not abstract, but like a deep, like undescribable internal change.
Yeah. And that's where like, yeah, I think a lot of our frustrations with this book come out is because there's these subjective truths that just can't be written, because when you write them as an absolute, you write them, they become kind of absolute, and then that takes away from the truth itself, you know, because it's so subjective. And that's the qualitative stuff again, like we aspire towards a qualitative, and that stuff really can't be quantified, so it can't be really even spoken about, because even speaking is quantifying on
You
some
have
level.
to experience it too. Like that's like you have to transmute yourself.
I think experience is like the quality of it, where like quantifying it, like you said, would be like putting it down on paper, you know, and being like, this is how it is, or this is what it is. But I kind of like the term that you use, like the inner work of 9, you know, to describe the card at the very end. Because just, I mean, inner work, I think, are like 2 perfect words to describe the Hermit card.
Yeah. And like, yeah, bringing yourself out of the mass group think, that kind of stuff, like understanding where you're caught up in that and pulling yourself out.
It's like, yeah, honoring your own truth in that sense.
And also, like, I mean, I love that synthesis of like, not, he's been so hard on science, but this chapter he's like, he kind of gives it a break. He goes, when science is infused with the depth of spirituality, then you can start using science towards life, you know, create like benefiting all life. So you're still like existing on this plane, but you're like, you have the other plane, that quality, that subjective truth. And like, I love that. Yeah.
I agree.
Like, and that's where like I love science for that reason, because it could get us, it can create these. And I like this, and maybe we talked about this in the last chapter a little bit, but this idea of like evolution, like these old archaic ideas of evolution, like being survival of the fittest, you know, but like we've actually, and science has actually come to more of an understanding of cooperation, you know, like so much more. Like ecological science has like informed other sciences where it is, and it's still, there's a long way to go in this, but it's this like, it's actually like the world is actually a world of cooperation, even more so than that, like survival.
Fractal.
So like there's this, what's that?
Fractal. I've been saying mandala, but I meant fractal this whole time.
Fractals. Yeah.
And that's what I mean by it.
Well, I think mandalas are could be fractals too, right?
That's what I meant, but
Yeah.
Like when you cooperation with it too, because yeah, and like even in the beginning of the chapter where he describes like, you know, vibrating particles that organize themselves into organisms that, you know, interact with an ecosystem, that interact with, you know, I don't know, I love the way he built on that idea of cooperation, starting from like the smallest form of, you know, existence that we can perceive to like
fractals.
things we like, you know. And I love that, because he's basically just being like, oh, here's a little flashlight and I'm just going to shine a little truth in your eyes just to see if it's working.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's so nice. That's a good way to start the chapter.
And the triangles are great because triangles are this like giving, it's like a tripod, right? It's like, or like you find the coordinates with using 3 points. You need 3 points to orient a coordinate, right? And that's all you need, but you can't do it with 2, and you can't do it with, and you don't need more than you don't need more than 3. So it's like really orienting, but it's like, yeah,
Stable.
I don't know. I think I had something more to say about that. Yeah, it's stable. It's stable. It's a tripod. Yeah.
Well, like the balance, like the inherent balance in 3s too, because when you think of it, like the simplest form of balance is 3, because 1, there's nothing, it's not balancing, it's standing alone. But like the first form of balance is 3. And that's why I love triangles and stuff, because I feel like there's like that, you know, like how a circle has no end, whatever, like, but with triangles, like there's this inherent idea of supporting, you know, and I kind of like that because it's, I don't know, there's something about it, like you said, where I guess like with the measurement of like, I mean, I took astronomy in college, and the way you calculate the distance of stars is you use the parallax. So you use 1 point on the globe on one side and 1 point on the globe on the other, and then where those 2 lines like intersect is like the approximate of the distance of that star. And I just like, I like, but thinking about that in like a spirituality sense of like morality, of like coming to conclusions on how you feel in situations, like not right or wrong, but like how you feel in respects to what's going on around you, and navigating that, and having like that parallax, and having like the you know 2 lines meet at that 1 point, and that being like where you are, and kind of, I don't know, having like a mental way of seeing that for myself is like fun. And especially for other people, it gives like a lot more understanding and compassion to like everyone when I look at people now. More than I had before, which I had a lot of. So I don't know, it's kind of nice. And the chapter on like love and growth and like that kind of vibe.
Can I?
I'm up back to school for psychology, so like I feel like this is just fueling me to feel like that's the right path, and I feel like I'm getting excited about it.
Good. Yay. I'm going to read the final chapter, or final paragraph. Then we can have concluding thoughts. I think we might want to talk about this one though. Now, the distinctly practical teaching of the ninth arcanum is that it is necessary to subordinate the directing intellectual initiative as well as the flowing spontaneous movement of thought to the heart of thought, i.e., to the profound feeling that is found at the basis of the thinking that one sometimes designates intellectual intuition, and which is the feeling for truth. It is also necessary to subordinate both spontaneous imagination and actively directed imagination to the direction of the heart, i.e., to the profound feeling of moral warmth that one sometimes designates as moral intuition, and which is the feeling for beauty. Lastly, it is necessary to subordinate spontaneous impulses and designs directed from the will to the profound feeling which accompanies them, that one sometimes designates practical intuition, and which is the feeling for good. So what he broke that down into thought, feeling, and will, right?
Feeling and will. And good, beauty, and what? Truth?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, good, beauty, and truth.
Yeah. Yep. Well, truth, the first one. Yeah. So truth, beauty, then good.
Yeah, truth, beauty, good.
For thought, feeling, and will.
Yeah, I mean, that's the aspiration, right? Like, and again, he's laying out the criteria, some criteria for feeling those senses, but it's subjective. It's like really hard to say anything absolute about how to get there. And he's trying, but
I think he's trying to do like the pillar thing too, where he's like, there's intellectual intuition, which is like just the knowledge of something, and then there's like the application of the knowledge past the point of knowing, which is a feeling.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then
You know-
what you do with that. Yeah.
And that's like how I bring everything to the heart level, I guess.
I wish he could mention, like, I don't know if he knows a lot about like Sufis, 'cause he might have only mentioned it once, but I feel like that's my understanding of Sufism, is that that's like a huge part of their operation, is like like getting to the truth through the heart, through like aspiring towards like union with divinity with the heart. But the thing about Sufis and is in Islam is that they know that they can never actually get there. There's like this yearning. If you read Rumi, that's like, it's all yearning for this beauty. It's all yearning for truth, beauty, goodness. But knowing that you're not, that's like, there's not, you can't get there because God is this ineffable thing that's actually unattainable. Like, but in that yearning, there's like some profound, like, alchemical spiritual transformation that happens, apparently.
My favorite quote of all time is a Rumi quote, and it's I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness the astonishing light of your own being. Which I love because it's like a sweet thought, but it's also acknowledging, oh, that's a sweet thought, but like I wish I could, but it's saying that it knows it can't.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
still a profound statement to even say.
And it's so heart, like, there's so much heart in that statement, so much like compassion and like, oh, and like knowing the darkness, knowing the pain, like, but like,
Knowing the light and knowing that the person can't see their own light, like they're like the hermit and they're still just like shuffling around, like not noticing this illuminating light in their hand.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a good point. I mean, I do think there are, like, this is a more ominous card in readings, and I think for some of that reason, like, it can turn you away from like some forms of empathy for people that sit on either side of like an argument sometimes. Or, I mean, that's not how he framed it in this. And I think for your spiritual journey, like, that's not what should, but I definitely feel like, okay, if it comes up in a reading, it's usually like, you have a lot of, you're isolating yourself because you're trying to find some truth within yourself, which take the time to do that, or like it can be like a little bit like you're isolating yourself from other people, like, and you're not seeing their perspective on things, or you're making yourself an other,
And I think times when you think about it, like both experiences are like two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways, because when you're isolating yourself to like figure out a truth, like in a lot of ways you are blocking out like the energy of other people. So it's kind of like, banishing or invoking with magic in some ways, where you're not like, casting out everything or bringing everything in. You're really trying to be like discerning about, what you bring close and what you keep farther away, like trying to find that equilibrium, like
Yeah, and it's, I mean, the other possibility of the hermit is the opposite, that is telling you to remove yourself,
True.
from the group
Go
think or
on a
whatever,
walk
like
about.
get some perspective, like,
yeah, like every Bodhi has to go out into the forest and just kind of like exist for a while and just, I mean, even in the Joan Halifax book that I keep continuously talking about in the last chapters, but she talks about like the rites of passage between like all these different indigenous cultures and shamanic cultures and stuff. And there's this acknowledgement of this individual path that like can only be walked by you, and it can only be experienced. It can't be like talked about or told, that's why, a lot of the teachers and the teachings of like Buddhisms and Taoism and stuff like that is more like riddles, because it's kind of you having to like seek where you value a concrete truth versus like an abstract truth, and where you can find a discrepancy in between and be like, there is some deep truth to this, but it's not necessarily a concrete truth. And you have to like accept that and constantly like reevaluate where you're at with that. I don't know, that's why I think like that whole like individual thing like resonates so deep with like the thing we most treasure and the thing we most fear as humans is it's like ourselves. We don't want to be alone, but it's so scary out there. And it's hard for people to put themselves out there. Like whether strong or vulnerable, you know, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm.
Was a good chapter. I take it back what I said. I still kind of like, I understand it was hard for me to read. This book is though, but it's good. I love our conversations around it. And every time I just gain so much. So
I love being challenged though, you know, like I think that's great, you know, like challenging your sensibilities.
it's good for me for sure.
Yeah.
Reading things that are like not like above your head, but like they're close to being above my head, where I'm like, oh, I'm really pushing it with like the density and the language and the speed at which he like jumps from thing to thing. Because at first you think, oh, he's moving really slow, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, we've covered a lot of ground. So I really like books like this in general, because it makes you feel like that alchemy of magic and stuff, where you are growing like intellectually and spiritually, just like coming into contact with the conceptions, whether you agree with them or you don't, or you understand it fully or you don't, you know. I don't know, I kind of like that about it too, because it doesn't matter what level you come at it at, like you will be changed a little bit by encountering it, which I think is my favorite definition of art. Like when people ask what art is, like anyone could write a book, but to have like a work of art or something that like moves you or changes you, like inspires a feeling within you, there's like a spark, and alchemy happens, and it's very intangible, but it's very, very much realized by you experiencing it.
Yeah, agreed. It's my favorite music, or our underground stuff is when I just notice my thoughts just going to places. I'm like, whoa, it took me there, Wow, this is a new pathway.
And you know, you can get caught up in those things getting you there, or you can like really appreciate the state itself, and like and still know that you won't always have it, and you know, and that's a beautiful thing and necessary.
I love meditation, because like no matter where you're at, I mean, you'll never go back to like the same place, like mentally, like when you meditate and you close your eyes and you like go somewhere else, or like you feel like you're not like, you're not really like, oh, I'm in my body and I'm breathing and I'm doing all the things that humans do. Like you kind of go into like this thoughtless state of just acknowledging and experiencing in the second. And I feel like you're always constantly meeting yourself where you're at, instead of going back to this like objective place. You're not like, I'm walking up to the same pearly gates, like you're encountering like a new version of that every time you go to it, but it's always there. And I find it super comforting. And like I've started feeling that with like the angel rituals that I've been doing lately. I haven't been like expecting to feel that way, but it's been nice to feel that way. This book makes me feel that way too.
Good, yay. I know. I'm glad we're doing it. We're almost halfway through. So 2 weeks will be Wheel of Fortune. Yeah, it looks like it's probably the same density as the Hermit was, or same kind of page content. So
I have a feeling it's going to get way more complex
from here on out. Yeah, probably.
I'm getting the sense that it's going from like the magician is like the connected most with like the deity, like the yod, right? It's like the first it's like no direct gnosis, and like it's slowly getting more diffuse into the world. Like I feel like the Hermit is like beginning to be a bridge, but the Wheel of Fortune is really a bridge of like, because it's the wheel of the world, right? It's the wheel of samsara. That's what the wheel is, but like but there's this idea of like this the transcendence, like the open circle is what he starts talking about. And that's my preview of the next chapter.
Okay.
It's like you can get caught in the wheel of samsara, but there is an opening and a spiraling that it actually is happening. It's cool, but I definitely have some problems with it.
Circular upward, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, and I think you're right. I think it is because each chapter now is pretty hefty. And it is. It's like we have Wheel of Fortune, then Force, which what is Force? Art,
Strength
strength.
or lust in the Crowley deck.
In lust. Okay, strength or lust. That makes sense. The Hanged Man, then Death, then Temperance. So, and they're all pretty freaking heavy. And then the Devil.
The devil. I can't wait for the devil. I really think he's gonna have some juicy stuff to say about that one. I want to
I think he's gonna demonize him
head
and
to that one even sometime.
sort of like a carnal type of thing, possibly
Yeah, that's my guess.
bringing it back to like earthly, like human realm to like take the power away from it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop the recording. Bye, y'all.